Greetings! Today I'm going to show off a quick and easy method that I use to generate some pretty sick and detailed IDM style percussion using Texture by Devious Machines, along with two other free plugins, namely Livecut and the OTT Compressor. To start with, the drums up the top here are something I've sequenced with Addicted Drums 2, and it's just jamming over a kind of Final Fantasy style synth arpeggiator loop that is coming from Retro Synth in Logic, and it's got a bit of Comeback Kid by Baby Audio for the delay portion of it on there, so a few bits and bobs. And then I've also got this layer here of IDM style electronic percussion beats that kind of fill the spaces or add to what's going on in the acoustic drums. And to show this off today, I've just simply used Logic's built-in drum machine, which is called Ultrabeat. It has this preset in it called IDM Elements 2, which just has a bunch of little kind of little short blips and that kind of thing, which is quite useful for this kind of thing. By itself, it's kind of cool, and it's kind of adding something to the acoustic drum parts. If I just solo that, and with the beats added, I'd like to go a little bit further with it and get some even more glitchy kind of and distorted varied stuff out of this. So far I've created this kind of glitchy perks pattern by hand by clicking in MIDI notes in the piano roll here, and you can see I've got all the hits here, so you can just go in and just, you know. I've done it with a bit more thought and care than that, but this can get even more interesting if I let some plugins do the work for me, basically. So let's put an instance of Texture on that. If I solo my Ultrabeat layer and give it a play, so you can see that my perks are now coming into Texture, and you might not be able to hear it super easily, but basically what Texture does is adds a sample layer above whatever is feeding through it, right? So if I turn up the gain here, so the sample we've got selected is this digital white noise, but if I change that to something like a bit more obvious, maybe like this water sound, and I can set a blend between my original IDM perk sound and the full sample here, so you can kind of blend between the two. I'll show you what that sounds like. You've got some basic envelope controls down here, and what I tend to do is put the decay as low as possible. And also the attack can be nice to have basically at the minimum value too. And that way it's kind of sharing the short stabby nature of the original perks. You know, if you've got the decay all the way up, this can start to get a little bit kind of mushy. And then something you might want to experiment with is where you set the gate. So if that's all the way down, it's basically, you know, every single perk and sound that comes through this is going to get layered with this water thing. But if you set the gate higher, then it's only like the loudest things that are going to trigger the sample, so it's only going to happen occasionally. So we can start to get some control of it there, but it's not really that great yet, bear with me. So if I play that back, and I can just scroll through some of these presets and start getting, you know, so this is kind of all right at the moment, but obviously it's a little bit kind of rhythmically static. I want to get that doing some more interesting stuff without having to program a load of variations by hand. I just kind of want to do it quickly. So I'm going to bypass Texture and create a little space here. I'm going to add this free plugin called Livecut by Smartelectronix, and I've talked about this quite a lot in previous videos. So if I set this to this mode here, which is Warp Cut, you'll hear what it does. So now, So that's starting to get it kind of more characteristically IDM and breakcore-y with those kind of like scrapes and stutters and that kind of thing. So that's kind of cool by itself, but what this has done additionally is kind of unlocked something really powerful about using texture. And so now if I go back into texture and re-enable that, so this is pretty cool, right? Because we're now getting some of these stutters are happening in texture and kind of being affected by these sample layers. But it's still not quite there for me, and there's one more trick that we can kind of do with this, and that is to add the OTT trick. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is basically just adding a whole bunch of copies of this free compressor called OTT, which is just obviously a really over-the-top dumb compressor that absolutely smashes whatever you put through it. And obviously the sensible thing is to then duplicate that a whole bunch of times. And what that essentially does is brings out even more detail in these clicks. Maybe they sounded a little bit weak. It kind of brings out all the punch and all the detail in the samples and the glitches, so this should hopefully now sound a little bit more. One other thing that I quite like to do is you've got this pitch control here, so you can sort of mess about with the pitch of the sample. So for example, so that's kind of cool, and you can get some cool results out of that, but because I'm lazy, I don't want to have to manually control that myself, so I'm just going to set up some automatic pitch modulation in the modulation window. If I simply grab this pitch knob, turn it all the way up to full, and then if I start playing that now, you can see in here that that pitch knob is now just spinning through and the sample is pitching itself up and down, right? But I think it happens a little bit too quickly. And if you set that to a slower rate so that it's kind of a more gradual pitch change, then we can start getting some really cool stuff as I start scrolling through the presets here. So. You could assign this mix knob to a MIDI controller to make it a bit easier to control, and the same goes for all of these controls. I'm just doing it with the mouse here, so. Last thing about that is it'd be nice to be able to record some of that to audio, because when I'm playing this back from a software track like this, obviously I'm getting that sound because I'm clicking through and scrolling through all these different presets, but I'm pretty sure that that is not something that you can automate in the plugin. There's not a mappable control for these kinds of arrows that change the preset, unfortunately. To get around that, we're just going to record this all as audio, because working with this kind of effect as a software track can get a little bit unwieldy. So I'm basically going to send this track to a bus. Now if I create an audio track here and set my input to bus 10 glitches record, hit create, I should be able to tweak settings in texture and Livecut and all the rest of it, and that should record to audio as a track under here. So it's kind of cool to just generate some little effects and stuff, or little bits, you know, so you don't necessarily have to use an entire audio file throughout a whole track like I have done here, because that might get a little bit grating. You could just use like little... But there we go, that's pretty much the technique. I think it's pretty cool because, you know, you can get these kind of detailed and interesting evolving textures really quickly and easily, and it kind of sounds like something that would have taken hours to do, or is like a kind of painstaking process, but it's actually not. But yeah, I hope that's been fun or interesting for anybody out there, and hopefully catch you in the next one.